is Harvard, and this is a different day for us. We've met with Dr. Ogletree now 2 or 3 times, and so thank you again for being who you are and what you do. But he said to us, he said, hey, look, you're on campus. Whatever you want us to do, I'm yours, and I'm taking you up on that, sir. Yeah. So this is a Foot Locker session from guys. I mean, look at what we got here. Look, this is it. The only person missing is the young man from the White House, and I'll say to all of us, I walked out with him, the young man who spoke before. He spoke this morning, the guy who stand up and works for the Attorney General, and he asked if we could work with the Department of Transportation, Department of Education, and the Justice Department to do something. And so we need to vote on it. All in favor of doing that, raise your hand. Aye. Those opposed, you're in the wrong room. So without further ado, this is James Cole. We have the same barber. They have the same barber. And what I'm asking them to do is just go ahead and do something. Sir, please do something.
We're going to start with Tree.
It's always the case, right? First, I'm glad that you guys are all here. I'm just going to say a few words and then answer a lot of questions that I also had. I have, in my lifetime, never seen the tragedy that our community is experiencing right now. It's just ridiculous. And a lot of it, I hate to say it, has a lot to do with race, and has a lot to do with gender, has a lot to do with sexual orientation. We're just not ready as a community to deal with those issues. And I've changed, as I said before, my teaching to make sure that people understand how important it is. I teach a course now called Revitalizing American Cities, and I'm talking about how do you revitalize American cities. People have to work, people have to have a home, people have to understand how important it is to get an education. And people also, this community, we have talked about mental health and how that affects everybody, not just them or them. It affects everybody, and how we need to take a step in the right direction. And so I think that if we want to do those things are important. And I think that this is a great opportunity to have Comto have a discussion about where we're going to now. And it's not just simply, more trains, more buses, more opportunities for people, but how are people treated? And I think you need to have these discussions talking about racial profiling that still happens. And I know, and I had a wonderful conversation with Dr. Scott about this, who spoke a year ago in my class. And it's amazing to think about how people will say, I don't want to sit next to him, I don't want to sit next to her. And that has something to do with their instincts, what they've learned, what they've been told, what they've experienced. And we need to stop all that stuff. Everybody should have a seat at the table, wherever that table may be. Everybody should be treated with the same respect and admiration. I had an experience just coming back from giving a talk yesterday in Maine. And Maine is probably, and not being critical, but one of the whitest states in America, right? And so when I got on the bus to come back from Maine, there was sitting in the inside, the 2 seats there, a white woman. And I said, do you mind if I sit here on the way out? And she said, oh, no, please join me. We had a great conversation. We had never met each other, but the fact of the matter is that she was treating me not like a subject, not like a black man, not like a threat, but like a person who's sitting a seat next to her and having a dialogue. And that to me was great. And I was whistling and singing when I was going out. It was so wonderful to be treated just as a person who's on a bus, who's sitting next to a person who probably has a different set of experiences, but really wanted to embrace what I was doing, and that was very important. So that's what I hope, and I think Comto's in that zone talking about those issues. And I think diversity, opportunity, and justice are the 3 things I think are very important, and I think that's going to be what will happen going forward. I'll stop there.
Great. Thank you, sir. It's a pleasure to be with you here today. What I'd like to chat about for just a few minutes as an introduction, and then again, I think it'll be best if you guys, ladies and gentlemen, give us questions and we can have an active dialogue. But what I'd like to talk about is today is very timely. We are in the midst of trying to reauthorize the most important education law in the country right now. It's called No Child Left Behind. Some of you know it as Elementary and Secondary Education Act. Some of you know it as. But it's been out of date. It expired in 2007. And we've been running the federal education agenda on waivers. We've been running on an expired law that we're trying to get reauthorized. The House just passed their version of it. And you can Google the administration's position on it. We think it's dead on arrival. There's a lot to be desired in that bill. They've passed it. The Senate right now is marking up and negotiating over their bill, which we think is a better bill, but still has a long ways to go. A couple of things I want to highlight, a couple of key issues that we'd like all of you to be knowledgeable about, and that's very important to us. And that's first and foremost, the education law, in our view, is a civil rights law. From its very beginnings, it was about equal opportunity. And what we really need to see in any bill that's passed is what we call accountability. And that means there's got to be transparency about gaps, how our schools are doing. We have historically had schools in certain neighborhoods not getting funding, not good schools. I myself attended what was called a dropout factory on the south side of Chicago. That meant less than half of us graduated. And any federal law has got to deal with that. We've got to make sure that those kinds of schools and children who attend schools in districts like that get the support and the resources they need. And any law that does not require that, in our view, is fundamentally deficient. The second is we need to have more resources. The president has $2.7 billion in his budget for ESEA or the law. $1 billion going to Title I schools. Those are the schools that serve the children in the highest need. And there's a lot of pushback to shrink the budget and to reduce much needed resources. And we think that that is very important that we have the resources. A couple more high key items, and happy to answer questions because there's a lot I could talk about. Teacher evaluations, teacher support, very, very important. It seems to be, one would think that it's automatically normal that you would think a part of whether someone is doing a good job is whether or not the kids are actually learning. Unfortunately, that's become a lightning rod. I'm happy to chat about how we can do that. It's not one size fits all. Teachers should not be evaluated solely on whether or not a child passes a test, but there should be a piece of that in teacher evaluations. If we're going to do that, we need to do a better job of supporting our teachers. How do we prepare them? Do we have ongoing professional development? What are best practices? And we're doing a lot of things in those areas at the department. A couple other things, assessment. It's kind of like a dirty little word, and the whole idea testing is bad and how much testing. We think testing is important because without testing, how do you know whether our kids are able to compete? We talk a lot about this global marketplace. We talk a lot about being competitive. But if we don't have assessments and we don't know what our students and children are learning, how can we know whether they're competing? We figure it out if and when they graduate and they're in remedial courses, or if and when they graduate, they can't perform the types of jobs that the transportation industry, for example, needs. So there's a lot to talk about, but it's very important and very timely right now because the bill in the Senate is being negotiated and marked up. Once it's passed, it's going to have to be reconciled with the bill that's been passed in the House. So we've got quite a bit of time left. The House passed theirs. We expect the Senate to do something soon. But we've got quite a bit of time, and that's one of the things I think would be a great takeaway from the conference. Thank you.
I had no idea when I came here in this room 5 minutes ago. I was
That's what he does to us.
So as my favorite quarterback said recently in a different subject, pray for me. But what I will say is it's an honor to be here. I knew Reverend Jerry Moore. I've had the privilege of being with Shirley, and it is a privilege. I've been with Warren and Bob on behalf of Comto when we had to speak up for ourselves. You know, there's nothing stronger when you have two dark, handsome, strong black men and a highly intelligent black woman on your team. You can do almost anything. And so I'm humbled to be here. I'm thrilled that my home girl from Jackson, Miss Mo, she is our new leader. She's highly intelligent, wonderful husband, and just dedicated and determined. And I know from whence she comes. Her daddy's from Canton. You all know where Canton is? It's about 19 miles north of Jackson. Home of L.C. Greenwood, the gold shoes. Just want to be sure. She didn't think I really knew, but I knew. And but for me, it's an honor to be here. One other story. Charles said that I was his mentor. For me to take credit as being the mentor of Charles Ogletree is like someone claiming to have taught Whitney Houston voice lessons. I think he knew how to sing already. And he's an incomparable talent. He's a man of great courage. He has that voice of God. Only he and Barry White could touch it. And but he's on a higher mission. He heads the Charles Hamilton Houston Center here. Those of you know that Charles Hamilton Houston was the architect of the Brown versus Board of Education strategy. You know, he was a man who said that if you're not doing good, you're a parasite on society. He was the first African American on the law review at Harvard Law School. His portrait's over there somewhere. And his first cousin, Bill Hasty, was the second. And so Charles Ogletree is in the tradition of Houston and Hasty, and we all know that Houston's prime student was Thurgood Marshall. We heard a discussion about why education is important. The case that brought a 27-year-old Thurgood Marshall prominence was Murray, Donald Murray, who integrated the University of Maryland. Education was important 80 years ago to our future. It's important today. When you go to any major American city and 50% of the Black and Latino boys who start the 9th grade are not there in the 12th grade, that's a crime. And where are the voices that are speaking out about it? And I would submit to you that there is much that can and must be done. Comto has a role. We all have a role. Our faith-based communities have a role. But if men and women don't decide that we're going to hold ourselves accountable to make a difference in the lives of an individual young person, male or female, we make a terrible mistake and we forfeit a great opportunity. Apropos the debate earlier today, the question was, a young man at one point said, well, you kind of have to get your ducks in a row before you do anything. If Rosa Parks had waited for the perfect time, we might still be on the back of the bus. You know, if we waited, if we said, well, the movement's not all planned. And I can tell you, Martin Luther King did not want to lead that movement. His deacon, E.D. Nixon, said, we're having a meeting here at the church, Reverend. He kind of did Reverend King the way Colonel Page does us sometimes. He puts us out there and says, sing, like they say. It's awesome. And either you sing or you don't. I'd like to tell you one story about our hometown of Jackson, Mississippi. In June, and Professor Ogletree will correct me, I think it's 1964. I was going to Sunday school. I wanted to see Brenda Charleston. She was a pretty girl. I went to Sunday school every Sunday. And somebody, yeah, he said that you're dressed like a minister, and I said I'm kind of the opposite. So you smiled too broadly at me. And but my Sunday school teacher was Miss Nettie Spence, and Miss Nettie was what in the Deep South we call a nervous woman. But she had reason to be nervous that day because 4 little girls had been murdered in Birmingham, you know, that morning, going to church. And so we did what we did in Sunday school when we didn't know what to do, when we didn't have a lawyer who could protect us, when we did not have a Comto to speak for us. We tried to find a Bible verse, and we seized upon 2 Corinthians 4th chapter, 8th and 9th verses. We are troubled on every side, yet not distressed. We are perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not forsaken, cast down, but not destroyed. And that got us through that Sunday. And And in the coming weeks, there would be greater trouble. Goodman, Schwerner, Cheney, they're found in an ignominious grave. We can talk about some all we want, whether you're talking about Jimmy Lee Jackson or Viola Liuzzo, all people who made a difference. So I submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, that we have a chance to address the 3 points that Charles made. I think he said diversity, opportunity, and yes. And if we don't do this now, justice, we will never, ever forgive ourselves. And I can tell you, in my little corner of the world, I practice law. What I'm trying to do is to make certain that diverse attorneys have a real opportunity. And it's one thing to graduate from Harvard Law School. It's quite another to have an opportunity to practice. And I want attorneys of color, women of color, who practice law not just from Harvard, but from any school in America, to have every opportunity. And so that's why I met with and I'll stop on this one story. I met with a Fortune 5 company general counsel, and he just closed a $50 billion deal, the largest deal in the history of the company. In fact, I'll tell you who it is. It was Brackett Dennison at GE. He was a William Wells guy. And he had all these pictures of the Red Sox up there. So I said, I guess you're a Brady fan. He said, no, Russell Wilson's my favorite quarterback. So it got warmer from there. And he says to me, Ben, he says, I know Ted Wells. Who else do I need to know? Well, I don't think he meant any harm by that. I think he meant, I really don't know anybody else. And who else do I need to know? And so within 3 weeks, I gave him a list of 8 to 30 attorneys of color. And Ted is superb. But there are others who are excellent. Women and men, and in 15 different practice areas. And as I meet with these top lawyers, as recently as 2 weeks ago here on the Harvard campus, with one of Charles' colleagues, David Wilkins, another brilliant man, and we shared this list with them so people can't say, I don't know anybody. We want them to know somebody. But this is something Comto's done throughout its history. Think of all the businesses that have gotten a chance, all the consultants because of your vision. Think of all the companies that are more diverse now, some of these wonderful sponsors that would not be diverse but for Comto's pushing. But now is not the time to recede. Now is not the time to shrink. Timidity is never answered. We must act now. We must act boldly. We must act aggressively. And I'm humbled to be with you. But I do want to keep my promise to Miss Nettie Spence. I want to be able to do more than simply look at a scripture to get me through the day. I want to be able to take action that makes a difference in our world. So thank you for allowing me to be a part of it.
And I like all the elements that you talked about, and I believe in accountability for teachers and giving them the resources with which to work with our young people. But the other piece I see that doesn't get addressed very much is the pay for performance. We say that word, organizations say it, and then they don't do it. We are entrusting our future to people who make less than maybe an operations person. That's unacceptable. And if we don't fix that, what we're going to end up doing is getting people who are mediocre, who feel that they go into education because it's a comfortable place to be for a minute and make a little bit of money and get out and not have a concern about teaching our children what they need to know. So that piece has to be fixed, and it has to be fixed nationally, because what we do is, it's just like in transit. One system will decide they're going to really do something well to pay their teachers, and so they flock over there. And then somebody else does it, and then they flock over here. So it needs to be system-wide. And I don't know how you do that, but unless we address the pay for the people who we've invested our youth to, we are going to lose this battle.
I agree, and I'll be, my first response is, we have to have a set of criteria by which we assess performance. And we have hit incredible headwinds just trying to figure out how to do that. And when we utter the words pay for performance, which I think, and almost every corporation, that's how it works, there are just a lot of considerations to take into account. I think the administration, the Department of Education, and me personally think there are really always two sides to every argument. And so we really try and sit down and understand the concerns of all those impacted, but we've got to work through the unions, we've got to work through tenure issues. Teachers face phenomenal obstacles, sometimes obstacles outside of their control, and so we have to take that into account as well. But I think it is, I agree 100%, it's a very complex question, and we are at the first line before we get to that line. The first line is what are the standards and how do we make determinations? The second line is how do you tie compensation to that? So,
Just to follow up, there has to be another element, it's the parent base. Because we're expecting teachers to perform miracles, even those who want to, but they don't get the support from the parents. And you can't legislate that, but there has to be an element, whether it's the faith-based community that gets parents to take their responsibility for supporting the teachers and understanding what their children are doing, going into the schools, holding schools accountable, holding teachers accountable. If parents relinquish that responsibility, then no matter how much money you pour into it, the bright ones rise to the top. Those who are mediocre and need more support will fall to the bottom. And so I don't know how we do all that. The parent side is another piece of that element to help the support of the teachers.
In 2 seconds on that, and I'll stop, and we're gonna let it go. We completely agree, and while it's difficult, we are taking steps to address that issue. So one of the things we do are what we call wraparound services, where we're not only in Promise Neighborhoods is a great example of that, where it takes a holistic approach, not just what's going on in the school, but what's going on in the community. That expands to parental education. We found that there are a lot of children start kindergarten behind because a lot of young parents don't know what they can be doing at home so that the children are better prepared once they get to kindergarten. So we're helping localities and states create programs where they go out and do parent education. Where you've got a problem where the parent education doesn't work and you've got a student who needs that, we're working on programs where those students and those children have a place to go so we can add support services. Mentoring are huge. And so, very excited, but I'll stop. I completely agree with all those points. Very important.
My question was to piggyback off of what you said, because it is a passion for me that teachers receive that type of support. But you have to think about that we're in a different day and time. You know, those kids coming into the classroom, you have the whole bullying situation, you have a whole different mentality of children in the classrooms that the teachers have to deal with. You see teachers violently hurt.
Yes.
It's like it has blown out of proportion. And how do you wrap your arms around it? Because yes, the teachers need to be paid more money, but the situation that the teachers are in, these good performing teachers could be backing away because of the fact that they're afraid too. They're afraid of who's going to be in the classroom that they're trying to teach. Or they won't exercise the full strength of teaching these kids because they don't know what they're going to be up against with some of the parents that's going to come into the classroom. When you talked about the wraparound parenting and educating them, they have to want that too. And it's kind of hard to reach them at different levels, and the teachers are still left with, well, who's there for us? I think this is really going to be a really big issue for us to move our kids forward.
I agree, and money doesn't solve everything. And so that feeds into the support we have to give for the teachers. It also feeds into, we've got a new rule out called teacher preparation. How can we prepare some of these teachers before they go into those types of environments? You've got a lot of teachers who've never went into a Title I school or inner city school, and they walk in and it is complete chaos, right? And so what can we do to help better prepare those teachers before they even walk into those situations? What more can we do with schools that are in those situations? And part of that goes back to one of the things I said earlier, which is identifying low performing schools, because where those types of issues are most prevalent, The schools are dropout factories. They're in the bottom 5% of the districts. And if we can identify those schools, we need to target them for more support, more resources, more technical assistance, more volunteers, more money, so that we can figure out what's going on. And the crises in the schools that lead to that type of environment are varied. Children show up, can't see, more frustrated because they don't have the vision. They show up with toothaches, and so they're more likely to act out. And so we need to have a holistic approach to figure out what's going on in the schools where the students are having those kinds of issues.
This is, and I don't envy you on the education side, okay?
Hard work.
I just want to say, taking the cue from one of the things that we said that we wanted to come out of today, which was really that action plan, actionable things, I'm going to suggest this. We, in the area of infrastructure, transportation being one of the lifelines, there is absolutely no question but that we have an intellectual infrastructure deficit because we are not feeding the pipeline. You guys have an authorization that's on the table right now in the education. We have one. We must be working on the 27th continuing resolution at this point in time. One of the things that the federal government can do is to help to break the silos down. I would like to propose and actually say I will write on it with whoever else wants to volunteer, that there actually be a provision for the introduction of a real pilot program that would be blending education and transportation together. I would also say Department of Labor, okay, so that we can actually develop a pilot program around funding for educational initiatives that are directly related to this sector that produces 1 out of 7 jobs in this country, okay? Because right now we're all kind of missing the boat, okay? And so if we could wind up with education, with transportation, they're no different than when the Department of Transportation came out with the initiative on livability, where they had EPA, HUD, and Department of Transportation at the table. We can do that. We can wind up framing that. That could wind up becoming part of Diana legislative. That could wind up being one of our legislative proposals, and also one that would wind up being Department of Transportation, Department of Education.
That is great. We have an Office of Career and Technical Education. And please, let's exchange business cards, because the great news is we're starting on that. So we're working with the Department of Transportation right now to figure out where are the gaps, like where are the needs, and we're trying to gear career and technical education so that the kids coming out of high school and these short-term programs are at least shown the opportunities there. And so that's happening right now. There's more that needs to be done. We've got 5 pilot states that we're working on right now, where you've got local and state officials very concerned with the transportation industry, focusing on it. We've got coaches in those states. We've got technical experts where they can call subject matter experts. So much more needs to be done. Would love to have your help, and excited that we can move forward in that area.
Can I just ask a brief question, and then I have a specific suggestion in mind. Bob, how many universities are there in the greater Boston area?
Oh, Lord.
Approximately.
You can't throw a rock like the golf courses in Florida.
Well, I asked that question because I think universities are one of the great resources. And if I were a 9-year-old little girl, average student, I think as Ms. Collier talked about, I'm mediocre, but there was a, geez, I don't see any of them in here, but one of those, well, the bright young woman, Sadia. The Sadia were at Northeastern, and once a week, we talked about homework. She brought me on campus. I saw what her room looked like. I realized that she was an attractive woman, but her whole life wasn't about her sexuality, that she had these dreams beyond work. If I were 9 years old, man, Sadie I'd want to be just like her when I grow up. And I submit to you that at all these universities that are like golf courses in Florida, there are Sadies. And I would also submit to you that we have to also change this mentality of our little boys, that somehow speaking the King's English is talking white, that being interested intellectually is somehow effeminate, and that's BS. That's one of the reasons the symbolism of the president is so important to us. You know, it's more than a symbol. But if students on a regular basis had an opportunity, and I recognize there's Clery Act and all that other stuff involved, but had an opportunity to be on a campus like these Comto kids were today, that can be life-altering and that can be life-changing. The last thing, Ms. Call, you're absolutely right. We don't dare write off as mediocre some child in the 3rd or 4th grade whose grades or test scores may be mediocre. We don't know what she might do.
Right, with the right.
And so it occurs to me that a pilot program where you get intellectuals to write about what has happened and what a difference, and to document that things work, can make a huge difference. And and Boston's not the only city with a lot of great universities. Last time I looked, there's almost every large American city has great universities, and they ought to be affiliated with our schools. And they have these facilities that as far as I can tell, the lights are off. Who says school has to stop at 3 or 5, or the gym has to close at 6? I mean, why can't we use these resources and put students together with college students, college professors, university professors with young people? I think it would make a huge difference. Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me. I apologize. Excuse me.
That's okay. One of the things that I was reflecting on, particularly as Ms. Collier was talking, Lady Mary Ann, was that with parental involvement and why we've gotten so far away from that in a lot of areas. The Title I programs and the Title I schools used to be so active, was such a key part of the community because your parents were required at that time to be involved. And having been a Title I parent and PAC president and that kind of stuff, not only did we go for the children, but we also had classes. And I'm thinking that you mentioned something called Promised Neighborhoods. Yep. The new language, the vernaculars, we're not familiar with that, a lot of us, working in the communities. Okay. But if we could maybe re-engage some of these younger parents in the way, not to make it necessarily mandatory, but to make it interesting and beneficial to them to be involved. I worked for many years with SCLC, with Dr. Lowry, and traveled the country and had a lot of success in programs, even at places like Cooley High, just by doing simple things of enticing the parents to come and be involved, giving them a reason to look at Johnny's homework, giving them a reason to come and watch Johnny play his games, showing the interest in the children. And we've gotten so far away from that now. We actually live in a community where parents are bullied by school officials. We're not made to feel welcome in the schools. They don't go to PTA, PTO, PTSO, whatever you call them, meetings, because there is this us-them mentality now. And so I don't know a solution, but I know that is really a part of the problem. A lot of parents have never been to their children's schools, have never been. So you can't expect them to be involved if they don't even feel like they're part of it.
Warren.
First and foremost, I want to thank all three of you for being here with us today. It's such a privilege just to have a dialogue with those of you who are in the fight. I guess my question has now more to do with this organization, Comto, and our mission, and the things that we're doing, and how do we now take what we are doing and blend the piece of education, transportation, and all these different pieces together to come out of here with something that we can say, these are some next steps, okay? Because we all understand the issues with education. We really understand the issues with transportation and infrastructure and the challenges that we have. But we're here as professionals, educators, and people who have tenure in this industry who've come together to walk out at the end of this session, at the end of these 4 days, doing something. And I take that from our colonel. We have to come out here doing something. So how do we now, and we're asking you all, from your perspective, what do we need to do? We saw what happened this morning, phenomenal. To be able to sit with young people and listen to these young people debate on subjects very intelligently, you know, and take a side that they really are not as familiar with as some of us who live it, you know. So I think we're on the right track, but my question again, what do we do? From your perspective, where do we go now? How do we come up with a few small pieces that we can say, these are the things we are going to start to do, but also over the next several events that we have. We're in Washington in September, we're in Washington in March, we're in Dallas, I believe, in next July, that we can say, these are the things that we're doing, and here is the progress. We can continue to talk and dialogue, but we really need, as an organization, to start to come up with some deliverables.
Can I add on to that? And I think we should clap for that, but I want to add on to that too, and when you address this question. As part of the Comto Leadership Institute, what we're doing is trying to develop the next set of leaders that can work in any industry. Their skills are transferable to any industry. However, we know the world of work is changing, and as Warren says, we have to get in front of that. We have to talk about the skills and competencies necessary for our students to be able to succeed in any world of work that's out there. So as you begin to talk about Warren's question on what we should do, can you also address the skills and competencies that are necessary for our students to have? Because managing ambiguity is a new competency that I think in the world of work that our students need to have. It's not something that we talk about at all. Managing change, being leaders of influence rather than leaders of direct leaders of people are new competencies in the world of work that we have to prepare our students for. So again, when you talk about what we should do, the action we should take, if you can also address the competencies that our students need to have in order to succeed in this new world of work.
I guess a couple things, thank you. A couple of concrete things really fast. The first is, Comto is an amazing organization. You guys, I'm sure, work a lot with DOT, and you're working with the reauthorization of the transportation bill. You know the issues there, and you're dialoguing from a legislative committee perspective. Step one would be to engage with education on our reauthorization law, the way you engage on the DOT reauthorization law. People know what your thoughts are on that. People, you communicate, you're in the pipeline. We at the Department of Education do not have that relationship with Comto, and that's step number one. I'm the general counsel, so I do this because I love you guys and this is all passionate to me, but I have an office of Congressional and Legislative Affairs, and I have a communications office, and I will put you in direct contact with them, and then you can move forward. Though you already have the right infrastructure, I just need to get you talking to the people at education so you can help us on that slide. So that's one concrete thing we need to do.
My issues first, yes. Directive.
And we already set up the time.
Good.
So that's number one on the law ESEA side, because a lot of what we're talking about really goes to supporting those schools, making sure they've got the resources they need, supporting teachers, and all of that is caught up in how we reauthorize this law. All of it, and that's where it starts, because if we don't have, I'll stop preaching. That's number one. Number two is on the skills and what you need side, and I'm going to defer because you guys are more the experts. we stand ready, willing, and able to help put resources behind where you need to go. So we need you to tell us what skills you need in the industry so that we can help push that way. Massachusetts is one of the 5 pilot states we have working on how we can work with Massachusetts on transportation issues, what types of skills, what areas in the industry. So that's got to be a two-way street. It's got to be helpful. And I'm happy to defer to experts in the room about where the jobs are in transportation, what the skills are, and then we can push resources, technical assistance, subject matter experts. I'm excited that the Department of Transportation last year funded a career pathways project with career and technical education. So DOT is moving with money into that area, but that's gonna really have to be a collaborative effort. And I think you're more likely to have a better relationship with DOT because they're closer to the skills that are needed in the industry, and then bring in education so we can push it down into the schools so that the schools are teaching and trying to prepare kids to do where you see your needs are. So those are just a couple of very concrete next steps.
Well, I would just ask, you talked about leadership. Why not have a leadership academy? Why not have at least a half day of your conference devoted to leadership? And why not have each of your chapters nominate several people as fellows for the leadership? So they might be men and women at mid-level, and the whole idea is, what does it take to be a leader at the next level? And then you also have the wisdom of so many people who've been at the top who can give you the inside baseball about what it takes to make that next step. So it seems to me if you had this leadership academy, they could talk about those skills.
Well, excuse me, I want to cut in on that, because that's what our CLI program is all about.
That's our Comto leadership.
That's what it's all
That's
about.
what the
So you
leadership
are doing
institute
it, okay.
is.
Yeah.
So we already have that. What I'm looking for and what I'm listening throughout all of the sessions from all of our leaders are the skills and competencies that it takes to be strong leaders. You know, we can be leaders in transportation, we can be leaders in healthcare, we can be leaders in finance, but leadership competencies is what we're looking for. We're looking to develop strong leaders that can be transferable to any industry. And the other thing we're looking to do is to move from being anecdotal to being analytical. That which gets measured gets attention. And so we want to start to measure and monitor not only our people, but the successes we have, so we can speak about it in a very critical way. We talk a lot, you know, anecdotally, but we need to really start to get analysis on what the actual situation is in order to build a solution to it.
Let me just say a little bit about, I want to pass the microphone back to the people in the audience of that. A couple of things are very interested in it, and I hope that people from Comto can help everybody understand what's going on. Everybody was talking about No Child Left Behind. We were left behind. A lot of our children were left behind, and we have been silent about it. And that we need to speak up about it, make sure things happen. And I think about the fact that Ben and I go to a place like this, Harvard Law School. It's not because Harvard Law School opened up its doors. It's because an African-American male, first one on the Supreme Court, Thurgood Marshall, made it happen. And he was concerned not just about Howard, but concerned about the rest of the world. And all that history is very important to understand where we are today and how much more we have to do. And I hope that people have a chance before you leave here, just go next door and see the building, the Lewis Hall. And this is Reginald Lewis, who's passed away, but he got a lot of money. And you know where his first $1 million went? Howard University. He never went to Howard University, but he knew that Thurgood Marshall had opened up doors for him from Virginia to come to places like Harvard Law School. And so we have a building named after him, and we have a bust of Thurgood Marshall in the library. I hope you'll see it. Charles Hamilton Houston trained Thurgood Marshall. We have a bust, picture of Charles Hamilton Houston right here in our library. It's not enough, but it's the beginning that we have to make sure the kids can look and see, I can do that too. I can be that too. Let me just say a word about women and mothers. And I said a little bit this morning, but it's really amazing to think about the number of women who are not prepared to raise their sons or daughters to go to college, go to finish high school. And that needs to be addressed. And it's not showing a deficiency, but showing a lack of opportunity for them to make things happen and for us to really embrace what they're doing. Some of you folks are from New York, and one of the persons who went to one of the Harvard schools here, Jeffrey Canada. And the whole thing, think about the Harlem's Children's Zone. And the reality is, he didn't read a book, he didn't have somebody else tell him what to do. He was thinking about what the 21st century should look like, and his sense was, it doesn't help to educate the children if you're not doing something for the mothers, right? And so the Harlem's Children's Zone is a pretty good, in my view, a good example of institution building to make sure that the next generation is taken care of and makes things happen. Finally, I want to say this as well. I think that Comto is, first, I'm glad that you guys are here, but what's really important is to build fences for the next generation. And it was so wonderful to have all these children here. And they may not get it today, they may not get it tomorrow. It may be a month, a year, several years, but they'll say, I remember going to that conference, and that's the first time I thought about being a doctor, a lawyer, in business, and health. All those things can happen. And I think that is what you have been able to do. And I am absolutely thrilled that the young people were here. They have accepted it. Give them a little time. And the final thing I'm saying, this is the final thing, is that we have to recognize that folks mature at different times and in different ways. And we can't give Johnny away, or Jill away, or Jane away, or Jack away because they don't seem to be doing well in elementary school or middle school. We just have to keep striving to make sure that Johnny and Jill and all the other people get all the support that we need. And if that happens, we're going to have a wonderful community, and I think that we will have a wonderful future. And this has been recorded, right? Well, let me just say this. Right. But let me just say this. Let me say, I know it's been recorded, but you have to think about successors. Who's going to take over what you started? And I'm not speaking about Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. Anybody be saying that I am? I really am. But you have to think about who is your successor. Who's the woman or the man, the boy or the girl who's going to take that thing from what you started and continue it? And you have to move aside. I've said that very clearly. You have to move aside. I know some of you think I can work forever. You can't work forever. And you have to make sure that everybody who's behind you has been trained to understand what the next generation holds. And that generation is waiting and eager to take on the challenges. Me too. I want to take the challenges, whatever on the 21st century. I want to build it. I want to make it happen. I want to make things happen and make sure that that next generation is involved in some way, and make sure that they're encouraged in some way, and make sure that they are the leaders that we are hoping that they will be to take our place very soon. Colonel, you want to stop us?
You can talk all you want.
Okay.
We've got about 3.5 more minutes.
Okay, I got this
Can
gentleman.
we get all the questions we want?
The gentleman up there was.
Anytime, sir.
Charles was suggesting if we could get all the questions at once, it may be possible to.
We could respond.
Yes.
Excellent. Well, one of the things that I would be interested in, and I work with kids from the inner city of Washington, D.C., is often we take kids from the top or the middle, but as we work our way down the sandwich, there are some kids that are reachable, that if you expose them to certain opportunities, that we've been successful in the business world. I would love to see them have that opportunity. I had a young man that we were working with in one of the very difficult charter schools in Oak City say, Mr. Antoine, you, how do you put it? I'm going to hustle. I'm going to sell drugs if I can't get a job. Because he had good skills. So either you help me get a job or I'm going to hustle. I'm going to sell drugs. And so he put it that way, and we helped him get a job. But there's a lot of kids in our inner cities that have skills, and if you really understand people that side of the world, I mean, they understand distribution channels, sales, marketing, law enforcement. And so they have the requisite skill sets. We just have to sort of push that in a different, and Colonel Page may send me back to Washington after this, but we got to make sure
Microphone went off.
yeah, it went off. Yeah, that's fine. We just have to make sure we look a little deeper at times, because the cream is gonna rise no matter what. Right. But there's some people at that level below that we need to reach down a little bit. You got to be thinking about your program.
Question. The microphone's off. Just one question. One of the things that I'm interested in, again, sort of on what Warren is saying about where Comto fits in and how Comto can help and support. I know President Obama is looking at segregation and how to eliminate segregation. And so that seems like a really lofty, big, huge goal. Where can Comto come in? Because it sounds like it's working on building community, so it sounds like transportation is in there. Just where is it? Where do you see it, and how are there opportunities for Comto to be involved in that?
Well, if you're asking me, I think first of all, Comto should meet with the president, because you have ideas that are 21st, 22nd century ideas, and he needs to hear that. And he's lost, as I said, the Republican in the Senate places, and he's trying to do it on his own. He needs help. He absolutely needs help. That is very important. And you also need to think about institutions and how important they are. When my kids, my wife had a vision to send the kids to school in Washington, D.C., where we live, before they started elementary school, and that was at the Midtown Montessori School. It's gone. It's gone. What happened to it? You know, and that was a school I drove to Washington, looked around, and say, where are you going to get kids going? My son, we didn't realize it had a hearing deficiency, and he couldn't hear in either of his ears. And only at Midtown did they test him. They had a doctor come in, they had the examination, and we learned that he could hear on the side, he couldn't hear anything in front of him. And now he's a grown man with 3 daughters and doing very well. But it meant that somebody who, not just his parents, somebody in the community said, that boy is smart, we need to figure out how to help him. And one thing, he's not participating in class, and that made a big difference. So those are the types of things that I think make a difference. We need to create those institutions that existed again, and it's going to be hard. It's going to take a lot of money, a lot of time, and you have to make sure that happens. And one final thing, this is the final thing, and that is everybody should have a mentor.
Yes.
And everybody should have a mentee, right? And you say, well, I don't have time. You do have time, and you just have to make the time. I remember one of my mentees in Washington called me every single night and cursed me out. And my wife was saying, why don't you hang up the phone? Because that young black man was suffering because he'd never met his father. He saw his mother being beaten. He wanted to drop out of school, and my job was to make sure that he stayed in school. And I could hang up on him, but I had to listen to him, because that was his grief being expressed. And that is what all of us have to do at Comto and beyond have to do, understand that a lot of people are suffering, a lot of people are quiet, and that's why we have too many people in jail, too many people without jobs, too many people without homes, and we have to find out a way as mentors and mentees to make sure that we make this next generation be in our community.
Could I also suggest this, following on what you said before about the young man needing a job, and you all already do it, but Comto certainly has interns, paid and unpaid, at your various agencies. But you can also prevail, it seems to me, on many of your vendors and suppliers to do the same. And then there are other companies that ought to take that on. See, the enlightened business person realizes that they cannot succeed going forward without an educated workforce and without a capable workforce. And I know it's an old saw, but we have to say it and we have to keep saying it. The other thing that I would like to emphasize, we talked about the mothers. Man, I'm a fan of mothers, because they are there when some of us men are not there. They are the real heroes. But if you think about 20 years ago, people couldn't read, and yet they wanted us to go to school, right? That Colonel Shaw's veterans would go see their kids finish school, and they were wearing their uniform 20 years after the end of the Civil War, but for them, that was one of the things they fought for. So again, we just cannot give up. At the school that my firm has adopted in Washington, D.C., Savoy Elementary, Southeast Washington, used to be the Bernie School. I pay the pizza to the class that gets the most students to come. I pay for the pizza if the class gets the most parents to come. The idea is talk your mom and daddy into coming. And if they care, it makes a difference. I'll tell you one final story. Really, it's one of the most moving things that's ever happened to me in my life. My daughter was quite a basketball player in college at 14. And but when she was playing in high school, there was a girl in far northeast Washington, and her father had never come to see her play. And she was my favorite player after my daughter. And I remember saying to him, "Your daughter is really remarkable. You have no idea what you're missing. She's such a beautiful girl, the person." And fast forward 5 years later, she is playing in her final game in college. And I saw a man, Charles, he was wearing what we used to call the Sunday go to church suit. And I was uncomfortable, it was a little too tight, but he was there to see his daughter. Man, oh man, that made my day. So you're right, we are not allowed to give up. We're not allowed to throw in the towel. We're not allowed to say no mas. We have to continue here because others overcame greater obstacles, longer odds, and chose not to stop. I can't quote it well, but Dr. King always talks about, walking up a flight of stairs without light, right? I mean, that's faith, and that's what faith is, and that's what we have to do. So I apologize. I wish I could offer you more specific things, Warren, that we should be doing here. But I think it really does require not only this session, but perhaps a smaller group sitting down and coming up with 10, 12, 15 specific ideas, embedding that with the entire group, and then getting on with the fight.
That young lady had a question.
Maybe one of the action items we could walk away with from here is to reach within our local chapters. Look at our legislative committees and have our legislative committees get together, come up with a common language to go back out to our local legislators and tell them we support ESC. What are you going to do? Okay, that's something we can do immediately. Okay, we can tap right into our local legislative committees, our chapter legislative committees. And then secondly, and maybe even extending beyond that, I'm thinking about things even just going on my own neighborhood. We have additional resources in parent groups. And parent groups are addressing issues within their local educational agencies. And there's substantial work that these parent groups do. We also need to reach out to parents groups and say, what can we do? Because we all recognize what our issues are. And the parents groups at some level are already trying to address those issues. They're trying to address the issues with the disparity, the education gap. They're already trying to address that. They're trying to, I'm speaking personally now. One of my parents groups, we've addressed the issue of diversity, lack of adequate number of teachers and administrators that look like us, given the percentages in the school districts. There's a number of issues that we have addressed that falls right in line with what Comto wants to do, and maybe what the national chapter also needs to look at there also.
Young lady in the red, didn't you have a question? You had your hand
I
up.
had two things that as you guys spoke, kind of resonated with me, which was, I am lucky enough to be able to afford to send my child to a Montessori school, but I think that a lot of the young parents are struggling with the cost of daycare and sending their child to an early Head Start program. And I think that the president and the nation should really be saying that all children should be in a Montessori style learning environment which encourages looking at things, questioning, how does this work, you know? Why do we get chickens? Does the chicken like being eaten? That's what my daughter asked me. So like, things like that, you know, thinking out of the box. Working and paying your bills and barely being able to afford to send your child to a Head Start should not be the way the nation should be going. And then another thing is that here locally in Boston, there's a program called Stepping Stone Foundations that actually goes into the elementary schools and looks at the children that they may not have the resources to go to private schools, but have the ability to go to private schools. And I think Comto will be a great fit in if they have a desire to kind of push those children forward to match them with maybe high schoolers or college students that are doing well, and maybe take them out on a field trip to the different colleges, you know, like that would be so much fun for an elementary school student. Basketball game at UMass Amherst or whatever.
Good idea. Go ahead.
Let's give them a hand. This is more than we had expected, sir. Thank you all. This is the beginning of a series of webinars that they don't know about yet. We're filming this, and from what Shirley and the board would like to do, we're filming all this, we'll turn them into series. First up next time will be Dr. Ogletree. He volunteered today to do that. In a few minutes, the interns are going to interview James Cole as city interns for our first webinar at the CLI. So thank you very much. Our next session will be a continuation of education and transportation, where James Cole will be the keynote. So I'm not cutting you off, we just extended it to another room. Following that, Dr. Ogletree will talk about the race issues in transportation. So part of what we're trying to do is, Terry and Diana, our board, is to take all these ideas and really make the CLI come to life. And I'm glad you're here, I'm glad Diana's here, I'm glad that MV is here. So don't be afraid to step in and say, we really want to do something different. So I really think that from a family point of view, it would be fitting, and I know I told her I wasn't going to do this, but I'm going to ask Marcia to give us the closing remarks. Would you please stand up and give us a word?
Absolutely. This was fantastic. Thank you all. Thank you all, particularly you, Ben, for stepping in. Mr. Ogletree, it's amazing to meet you, and we've already started our conversation on what we're talking about, and so I look forward to continuing it. Thank you all for coming. I think this is a great start, a great launch to something that's going to be amazing that we're going to see coming forward from Comto. So keep your eyes peeled and keep watching out for what we're doing.